We usually perceive the physical world as a collection of solid objects. However, this material reality is a secondary effect of a much deeper system of invisible, interacting energy fields. Nuclear engineer Keshe proposes a framework to map this architecture, suggesting the entire universe is governed by the rules of plasmatic magnetic fields, dynamic forces of continuous attraction and repulsion. Solid matter represents a boundary layer. It is the specific radius where invisible field gradients reach a threshold of density high enough to become tangible to human senses. When these fields are captured and their energy is lowered to a stable state, they manifest as GANs, or gas in a nanostate, the physical bridge between pure energy and solid matter. Understanding this mechanism requires reverse engineering the logic of these fields. We begin by mapping the internal architecture of a simple magnet to see how invisible forces dictate physical form. By tracking how these fields scale from a single core to a biological cell, we can map the transition from raw magnetism to the spontaneous emergence of life. This diagram shows a cross-section of a simple metallic ring magnet. While the metal ring appears to be the source of the force, the architecture of the plasma field actually originates from the empty center. This hollow space contains the principal fields. Despite the lack of physical matter, this center point holds the highest concentration of field strength in the entire system. Reaching this absolute center is technically impossible. As an object approaches the core, the attracting and repelling forces increase at an exponential rate, creating a natural, impenetrable barrier. Physical matter renders into existence at the exact radius where the central field strength diminishes. The solid metal ring is simply the point where the field's intensity drops to the matter strength threshold. The magnetic field carries on past the edge of the metal. It continues into the surrounding environment at a lower submatter strength, creating an invisible atmosphere around the object. Solid objects act as the visible shoreline of a much deeper, invisible ocean of central energy. This animation illustrates two distinct plasmatic fields interacting in three-dimensional space. The magnets maintain a continuous flow of energy, functioning as a balanced loop where each object simultaneously receives and outputs field lines. If the field volume exceeds what the magnets can process, it creates internal friction. This excess energy pushes the metallic rings apart until the flow can be stabilized. This establishes a positioning. The magnets find a perfectly balanced gap where they can bleed off enough excess energy into the environment to maintain a smooth, rhythmic circulation. Because all matter is composed of these internal plasmatic fields, this rule extends to non-metallic materials. Even a plastic ring possesses a specific gravitational magnetic field signature. By artificially generating a field that matches the plastic's frequency, the two fields link. The plastic can then be manipulated and moved as if it were a ferrous metal. Physical distance and the movement of matter are governed entirely by the inviscid of matching or repelling field frequencies. At a large macroscopic scale, the interaction between an object's external field and its surrounding environment produces observable physical effects. When two plasmatic fields rub against each other, they lose a portion of their total energy. This atmospheric exhaust manifests as an aura. You can detect this energy loss through touch. When you hold your hands close together, their auras interact, and some of that field strength is reduced to the level of heat, which our very own skin can then perceive. This logic scales to planets. The blue halo surrounding Earth is the visible radiation created when the planet's core field interacts with the field of its surface water. The sun's brilliant golden glow represents a similar boundary friction, the interaction between its internal gravitational magnetic strength and the surface plasma. These auras are dynamic. Because field strength is tied to internal chemistry, the human aura shifts in color based on what we consume, such as the energy release of a strawberry reflecting as a pinkish frequency in the stomach. From body heat to planetary halos, these phenomena are friction-based exhausts of interacting gravitational magnetic fields. Biological life utilizes these field mechanics to capture energy and matter from the atmosphere. Looking at a cross-section of a leaf, we see two parallel nanolayers separated by a salt-based liquid solution. This structural arrangement generates a localized field within the liquid gap that pulses at a rhythmic frequency. The leaf calibrates this field to match the plasmatic signature of atmospheric carbon dioxide. This creates an environmental magnet. The leaf's internal field latches on to external CO2 molecules and pulls them through the boundary layer and into the gap. Once trapped, the CO2 loses energy and transitions from a gas into a solid state, manifesting as GANs within the leaf structure. Biological growth is a mechanical process of setting up physical boundaries to trap specific elemental frequencies. We can replicate this biological blueprint using an artificial GANs reactor. By submerging a nano-coated copper plate and a zinc plate in salt water, we recreate the internal environment and layered structure of a leaf. This setup generates the specific gravitational magnetic frequency required to interact with carbon dioxide. The reactor extracts the CO2 from the surrounding air, pulling it into the water where it solidifies into a usable GANs material. Altering the physical plates changes the field frequency entirely. Replacing the zinc with a standard copper plate creates a new environmental signature. This new configuration ignores atmospheric CO2 and instead interacts with the oxygen in the water to produce green-blue copper oxide. By adjusting the physical boundaries of the reactor, we can tune into the exact frequencies needed to pull specific elements out of the environment. On the surface of the water in a CO2 reactor, a secondary reaction begins to take shape. The field environment created to extract carbon also attracts atmospheric fats and proteins. Oxygen acts as the magnetic connector in this process. Its field lassos environmental carbon, nitrogen, and hydrogen, locking them into a single structure. This chain reaction within the reactor spontaneously synthesizes amino acids, the essential building blocks of biological life. Ultimately, biological life itself emerges from the inevitable mechanical accumulation of these properly aligned gravitational magnetic fields over time.